Well, welcome everybody. You hear me okay? Good. Lovely to see you all. Lots of familiar faces. I've been having similar conversations throughout Discover for the past 2 days. But hopefully we're going to bring it to life a little bit more meaningfully in the next half an hour. So thank you for spending the time at Discover. Bit of a spoiler alert before we get going. I was given the task of trying to describe an IT strategy that could remain current over the next 5 years. I think that's a tough ask, right? And if you're in IT, you're probably sitting there going, I want to know the answer to this question. That sounds amazing. 5 years worth of IT strategy in half an hour. That'll be awesome. In reality, what I'm going to try and do is help you unpick a model or a framework that's going to help you shape that strategy, and that shape is going to remain current, we believe, for the next 5 years. Your feedback really makes a difference, so if you get the chance, please go into the app and provide some feedback. But why don't we get through some content first before I ask you for feedback on the session. So, a couple of things I'm going to try and cover in the session over the next 25 minutes, half an hour or so. As I said, I'm going to provide you with a model that underpins the strategy. So we've been using this model with customers globally for the last 6 years. So I can tell you it has survived 6 years worth of inspection and interrogation, and it works still, very current. And clearly, if we're talking about the next 5 years, probably the biggest paradigm shift we're all facing, and hopefully you've heard enough about that here at Discover over the past 2 days, is what? Anyone? AI, right. So if you're going to build a strategy for the next 5 years, we want to give it some shape, and we want to meaningfully tie it to how you might consider building out the AI capability and the AI factory inside that 5-year strategy as well. Because without shadow of a doubt, and I've been in the industry now for what, 30 years, this might be my 23rd Discover, AI is probably the biggest inflection point that I've witnessed in terms of how it can reshape how we use technology to advance the way that we live and work. And I think Antonio called it absolutely correct in the keynote. What I would say is, I think there's a real correlation between the last 5, 6, 7 years of digital transformation that we've witnessed through the industry and how that's created the fuel that we need to be able to start unlocking AI use cases at scale. So all of that digital transformation effort that was clearly accelerated through the pandemic as well has created huge amounts of data. Volume of data is estimated this year to touch 181 zettabytes. That's created, captured, and copied in the enterprise. So we have a huge opportunity in front of us to start taking advantage of that data and putting it to work inside our organizations. But here's the really key thing, we need to do that in a very trusted way. We've been talking to customers over the last couple of days not only about putting that data to work at scale and in production, but making sure we do that in a trusted, ethical, and compliant way. HPE has very clearly published its principles for how we use data to build AI outcomes. We call them our ethical AI principles: privacy, human-focused, inclusive, responsible, robust. And the reason that we publish those principles is because we want trust in our ecosystem, with our customers, with our partners, about how we use data in HPE. And I think Phil Mottram called it out really well. With the rise of AI, data-fueled AI applications, the threats we're facing are even more sophisticated than they've ever been. So not just inferencing at scale and in production, which is the course to chart for the next 5 years, but doing it in a trusted, ethical, and compliant way as well. Bad data into the inferencing engine creates biased outcomes at the inferencing. Well, with that said, I guess there's some key questions to answer, and I said I'd share a model with you about how you might think about shaping your strategy over the next 5 years. And I think there's a number of agendas that are commonly at play inside most organizations. And I want to share those with you. So how do we put that intelligent and trusted backbone to work over the next 5 years? Well, probably one of the most significant agendas is how we use technology to connect to and shape the experiences that we deliver when we connect to people. The experience agenda is all about redefining the way that we live and work. It's engaging us with new productivity tools and new engagement experiences that both excite and delight us in the way that we engage with data. Clearly, generative AI has completely opened new ways of engaging with technology and with data. Our customers are looking to put AI to work across a whole range of use cases. And I don't want this to become a use case discussion. I think you can spend endless hours thinking about different types of use cases for AI. I put some up on the screen just as examples of where we're typically seeing customers put AI to work to engage people with new experiences. Whether it's first draft content creation or real-time translation, conversational search, which we're demonstrating here at Discover in the Innovation Campus, to simple things like online meeting summaries. All of these techniques, these use cases unlock new levels of productivity. They change and shape the way that we engage with technology. But that's not the only agenda at play inside organizations. Don't just be thinking about putting AI to work to redefine the way that people live and work. Also be thinking about how you can use AI to translate the physical world as well. I think Antonio coined it physical AI at the keynote. Here we're more interested in understanding the physical world around us, instrumenting that, sensing it, interpreting it, and using that digital insight to simulate scenarios that we could then control the physical world with. And again, we're demonstrating digital twinning technology here at Discover. And again, this gives rise to a whole bunch of new use cases, from digital twins through to robotics and cobots that live side by side with the human operator as well, to basic things like predictive maintenance, computer vision. We're using AI not just to engage with people, but we're also using it to engage with the physical world around us as well. And so I'm seeing more and more customers begin to cross the boundary between these two agendas, using agentic AI to couple agents across these different disciplines to create these orchestrated agentic outcomes as well. So that's my first two agendas that I would get you to think about when constructing an IT strategy for the next 5 years. How am I going to use technology to engage with people? How am I going to advance the way that we can make them productive or engage in the way that they live? How am I going to use technology to help me to understand the physical world around me in a more meaningful way? It's interesting when you ask customers about the use cases they're driving in these agendas, because it forces a kind of simple set of questions. If our use cases are coming in from those two agendas on the left-hand side, the question that becomes really critical to your long-term IT strategy are, what are the implications on building AI factories and building IT systems and platforms that can respond? And what I found again is that there are two critical agendas at play when answering that question as well. There's a symmetry to this model, which I hope you'll find appealing. The first agenda is clearly one dominated by the right mix conversation. What's the right kind of platform that should underpin the workloads and the factory strategy that I've got? I found this a fascinating article from a recent survey from Barclays, polling top CIOs. When it comes to their platform strategy, one of the big inflection points is more and more CIOs considering moving workloads back to private from public, which is an interesting phenomenon to me, having spent 10 years with customers stating a cloud-first strategy, which has been arguably in the other direction. This rebalancing exercise is a really interesting phenomenon. I don't think it's accidental. I think you'll find it's connected with the value of data and where that data sits. And the more that data becomes a tangible asset inside the organization, the more important the decision about where that data resides becomes. Sovereignty, privacy have become top talking conversations inside organizations today. And so when we think about the platform's agenda, we're trying to answer those basic questions of, where do I use public? Where do I use private? Here's a hint, almost always, it's a combination of both. I might experiment in public, I might scale out on private. Where your data lives matters. How that data is entangled in your other systems matters. It makes implications on the platforms. The cost of accessing data or pulling data out of certain platforms has a bearing on the choices that you make. I've had more and more conversations over the last year around sovereignty and around disconnected. Probably one of the big announcements you heard at the keynote was bringing not just disconnected to private cloud, but to private cloud AI. Had a very meaningful discussion with customers that are looking for exactly that use case. But whatever the platform strategy is, it's clearly going to be a mix. That platform strategy has to support those use cases that are coming in from the experience and digitization agenda. Here's the big pivot that I'm seeing. 5 years ago, if we talked about AI to customers, we would have had what I call a model-centric conversation. A lot of customers concerned with how to build models, how to train models. The data science role was very prominent in those discussions. Fast forward to 2025, the data engineer has become more prominent. We seem to have moved from a model-centric discussion to more of a data-centric discussion today. The role of the data engineer is increasingly one of the most significant roles inside organizations. And why? Because that's the role that is trying to make all of the organization's data available. And that's not an easy job. Data lives in silos, lives in different formats, has different security and governance and controls and regulations around it. So providing all of that data in a common data fabric to service these AI use cases is not easy. But it is where our customers are spending most of their time. And data engineering itself is not an easy discipline. Building those data pipelines across the organization, across both operational technology as well as information technology, is difficult. Data ingestion and integration activity, cleansing and pre-processing of the data, making sure you've got high quality, validated data. These are not small undertakings inside your strategy. But getting it right and getting the metadata around that data and getting the governance controls around that data is going to make all the difference when it comes to delivering AI outcomes at scale inside the organization. Now, here's the interesting thing. While most of my customers will recognize each of those agendas at play, the experience agenda, engaging with people, the digitization agenda, engaging with the physical world, engineering and platform choices that they make in terms of how to respond. All of these agendas kind of interact with each other. There's a kind of symbiosis across these agendas. And I wanted to just explore that with you in the next few moments. And when looking at this question, I was forced to debate the dilemma about whether or not I wanted to be focused on use cases or something else. We've all heard the term AI factories, and we've all, I suppose, had our own response to what building an AI factory really means. In my opinion, it's not a factory unless it can handle multiple use cases and deliver multiple inferencing outcomes. You don't build a factory for one use case and then build another factory for another use case. That's not scalable. A factory should be capable of multiple use cases, delivering inferencing at scale for multiple outcomes. So I decided that actually the questions or the implications could be boiled down to two really easy questions. And I've been having these conversations on the floor over the last couple of days. When you get those use cases coming into the organization, ask yourself two questions. Do I own the data? And do I own the model? And actually, the answer to those two questions is really informative in terms of how to think about building an AI factory at scale. So let me expose that a little bit more to you. I love a 2x2 grid. I think it makes things really easy and simple. So here on the x-axis, we have the model. Either it's my model or it's not my model. On the y-axis, we have data. Either it's my data or it's not my data. Pretty straightforward, I hope. So let's look at the different quadrants and try and figure out the implications on how you build outcomes for those quadrants. In the lower left-hand corner, and I'm going to call it the run quadrant, it's not your data, it's not your model. You're simply using AI capabilities that are typically infused into other applications. So someone else is building the platform, someone else is doing the engineering work. You're a consumer of that AI service. What's the most obvious example of a run use case? Something like ChatGPT. The amount of debate organizations have about whether I should or shouldn't be opening up that kind of generative AI capability inside my organization is huge. The implications are big. Nobody here is asking ChatGPT to write complex contracts with financial penalties if I don't deliver on the contract, right? Because the risk is too high. But we might be using it to answer basic search questions or summarize meetings or summarize key points. Low risk activity, but high levels of productivity gain. The goal in the bottom left-hand corner is to think about the factory as simply being a center of excellence, a functional capability inside the organization that brings opinions from across the organization together and asks them to make decisions on how we should or we shouldn't be using that kind of technology inside our organizations. So even if your only ambition in AI is to leverage the work that others bring to you, still make smart decisions, cross-functional decisions, about where and when we can use that technology. That team's probably going to have to be quite broad. Legal, IT, security, data teams need to sit and consider where we can and can't use this kind of technology. Otherwise, you have chaos inside the organization. So the outcomes of those decisions need to be really clearly communicated. Here, the factory isn't a physical manifestation, it's a virtual engine inside the organization making critical decisions on behalf of the organization and looking at the risk. Majority of the customers I'm speaking to today are looking to move up from a run state into what we call a RAG state. It's still not your model. But now you want to take advantage of open source pre-trained models and bring them to bear on your data. So turning that AI engine into the data that makes you unique inside your organization. Up here, focus on controls and data availability. At this point, we now have impact over here on the platform and engineering agenda. I actually need to establish that. I might need to build the inferencing platform at scale inside my organization. Inside HPE, we've actually built our own version of ChatGPT, which is trained on HPE data. So it's our data that we can more reliably work on the inferencing output And if you want a quick clue about why we delivered PCAI, or private cloud AI, to the market, it was to satisfy that top left-hand quadrant. If you want to get inferencing to scale and in production, and you want to do it quickly, taking advantage of existing enterprise-level hardware and software, private cloud AI is the perfect inferencing factory for you. Bring open source models onto the platform, train it on your data, start to unlock the use cases that uniquely you can solve with the data inside your organization. So the top left-hand corner, the quadrant we call RAG, is probably a quadrant that takes advantage of something like private cloud AI. From RAG to riches, excuse the pun. There are a few customers, and maybe there's some in the audience today, that aren't just looking to use their own data, but they're actually looking to build their own model. Not a small undertaking. We're talking about potentially millions of connections. Private cloud AI is not the factory platform to help you build models. Here we're talking about high-performance compute platforms. We're talking about supercomputing platforms, potentially exascale platforms. Platforms that can do things like model the behavior of the human brain, like we're doing with the University College London in the UK. This is not an AI factory that's just built for inferencing at scale. It's built for training at scale. And there are many entities, organizations that I've spoken to over the last couple of days that are absolutely in that market. So the AI factory for them is one built on platforms that scale to those kinds of complex tasks. But I imagine that 90% of you, maybe more, aren't occupying that space. You're more likely to be occupying the run and the RAG quadrant. Finally, I suspect you're all wondering what that lower right-hand quadrant really means. You want to build a model, but you don't own the data. What kind of scenario could that be? Well, there's plenty of organizations out there that have trained models on data they don't own. In fact, there's pretty famous and high-profile lawsuits currently out there testing the validity of trying to train and build models on data that you don't own. Most notably, looking at the New York Times taking OpenAI and Microsoft to court. Recently, a couple of weeks ago, I read about Disney and Universal taking Midjourney to court over the same reason. So be careful of that lower right-hand quadrant if you're building models. We don't say don't do it, but I would say make sure you've got the legal protections, the right to use, the license model in place. If it's your customer's data, their permission for you to use that data for the purposes of training models. So hopefully those two questions, do I own the model, do I own the data, as those use cases come in, help you think about the kind of AI factory that makes sense for you to scale up over the next few years. Last question, is there an agenda missing in all of this? And I had some really interesting conversations with customers who immediately recognized, hey, it's not all about technology. It's not all about data. It's not all about workflows and models and engineering. It's actually about something more fundamental. If you're going to build a 5-year, any year IT strategy that's going to work for the organization, focus on how you're evolving the operating model inside the organization. This sounds like the soft tasks. The implications here are management of change, process re-engineering, communications. The hardest part about making any strategy work, certainly an AI strategy, is to get adoption. And you're going to be fundamentally, potentially changing the way that people live and work. And if you don't manage that change, heads up, people don't like change. So if you really want to put AI to work inside the organization, be clear about why you're doing it. Communicate why you're doing it. Be careful about making sure you redesign those processes to take advantage of the use cases you feel you can unlock. The operating model becomes a critical element to actually realizing the value of AI. So I promise to give you a framework, a set of interconnected agendas with some implications that allows you to think through what the shape of a strategy might look like. The strategy should at least be able to answer the implications and the questions raised in each of the agendas. And when thinking about an AI factory, think about those two key questions. Are you run? Are you rag? Are you riches? Or do you need to regulate? And the easiest way of putting all that together, don't think of an AI factory merely as the platform. I know I said PCAI is a great answer to RAG. High performance compute and supercomputing is a great answer to riches. But to actually put a factory together, think about the engineering work. Think about the operating model. Think about security and trust. Make sure all of those combinations come together to build the factory that can work at scale. Whether it's turnkey AI factories like PCAI, all the way up to sovereign, disconnected, and high performance. If you get that right, you'll start unlocking the value of the use cases, which undoubtedly over the next 5 years will continue to change shape. But what I can tell you is, it'll continue to focus on the experience we can deliver to each of us, and it'll continue to expose new truths about the physical world in which we operate. Hopefully, although I didn't give you a strategy, I gave you some shape to that strategy that might survive the next 5 years of this huge paradigm shift that we're going through. With that, I'd like to thank you for your time. Thanks for showing up. Many familiar faces I've spoken to over the last couple of days. Really appreciate your time. Thanks very much.